Top tip number 6, open your eyes, see the light. Our eyes see differently than our cameras. Our eyes are constantly moving and our brain is constantly rendering what we see, unlike a camera that is seeing just a single image in an 8,000th of a second or over many minutes or many hours even, but just a single image. And our eyes don't see like that, our brain doesn't recognize images like that. So to make a comparison is very difficult, but we must understand some of how our eyes see light compared to how our cameras see light and what the difference is. Our camera's lens has an aperture which is similar to the iris in our eye, controlling the amount of light coming in. Our eyes have a retina which receives the light, as our camera has a sensor which receives the light. And both our eyes and our camera see reflected light. Some differences between our eyes and our camera is that we have two eyes. Our camera's usually only got one lens. Our eyes and our brain are constantly evaluating the light, and we don't see in single images as our camera sees in single images. Our eyes are able to see detail in a far broader tonal range than our camera is. In a bright light we can see detail in light objects, and we can see detail in darker objects or in areas of deep shadow, whereas a camera often isn't able to render detail in both bright and dark areas of an image. It depends very much on the lighting and of the tone of a subject that we're photographing. If we're photographing a white subject in bright lighting or a dark subject in bright lighting, our light meter will read quite differently and our camera will see quite differently. When we're photographing in soft, even, low contrasting light, it's much easier to get a well-exposed image because the tonal range is narrower, so our camera can make a reading and record an image much more easily. In lighting conditions where the light is hard and high contrast, it's a little more difficult to make a well-exposed image because the tonal range is so vast between dark and bright. It's difficult for our camera to read at either end of the tonal range. So there's choices to be made on where we'll expose our image and what we'll choose to expose correctly. How we use the camera's exposure meter to read the light and how we set our camera will result sometimes in very different images, especially when we're shooting in high contrast lighting conditions. When we are photographing in bright, strong light conditions and take an exposure meter reading from a light object in the frame, we will see detail in that object, but not necessarily see much detail or any detail at all in the darker areas of the image where there's dark objects or shadows. If, on the other hand, we choose to expose the image for the dark areas, so take a reading from the dark portion of the image and set our camera to be well exposed there, we're not going to see detail in the bright area of the image. This is because the camera's sensor is limited into a certain range of tones that it can read and create a well-exposed image from. As camera technology changes, this is also changing, so maybe at some point in time this video will be a little bit redundant because the camera's sensor will be able to record a greater dynamic range of tone that is closer to what we actually see. As you understand more of how differently our camera reads light and records light than how we see light, you will be more creative with your camera.